Hello, and welcome to Sammy C. Today we're going to jump into the second poet from the Something More Than Shakespeare Poetry Workbook. We're going to talk about Ezra Pound. But before that, I'd like to just jump into a bit of an explanation about modern poetry. I wanted to be clear. Walt Whitman is sometimes called the father of free verse, and was a pioneer of the free verse style of poetry. His work was a departure from traditional forms of poetry that were popular in the 19th century. His legacy continues to influence modern poetry, and he remains one of the most widely read and studied poets in the world. But he is not considered a modern poet. Modernist poets refer to poetry mainly in Europe and North America between 1890 and 1950. Modern poets broke free from the archaic European language and style. They did not believe that all poems should rhyme or have a set rhythm or beat. They felt like making poems rhyme made poems longer than they had to be, and it really clouded what the poet was trying to say. It was difficult in America for these modern poets because American publishers did not want to take a chance on this new form of poetry. That's why ones like T.S. Eliot and Robert Frost were actually published in Europe before they were recognized in America. One man who influenced this was who we're going to be talking about today, Ezra Pound. He is the one who helped T.S. Eliot as well as Robert Frost in their endeavors to get published. He also helped other famous poets like William Carlos Williams, who was not only a poet but also a pediatrician from New Jersey. Okay, so jumping into Ezra Pound. He was born in 1885 and he died in 1972. His middle name was Loomis. In 1945, he was declared insane. He traveled abroad to Paris and France. So, Ezra Pound was one of the most shaping forces in modernism. Pound's first published poem was interesting. It was a limerick, which is a humorous verse with 3 long and 2 short lines with the rhyme scheme of A, A, B, B, A. This appeared in a local paper not so very long after the year of 1996. Guess how old Ezra was at the time this poem was published? I'll give you a second to do the math. Only 11 years old. He believed in himself, even when others said he wasn't good at things. This tended to turn others away. He was said to be known as a loner and not to be seen with friends. Despite his early start, he helped as well as promoted such writers as James Joyce, T.S. Eliot, Robert Frost, W.B. Yeats, William Carlos Williams, Marianne Moore, H.D. and Ernest Hemingway. He was once thrown into a pond for wearing flashy socks. Not sure what was considered flashy back then. I wonder if Ezra would like today's interesting selection. Apparently, he had a very unique sense of fashion for his day. So, defining poetry types for clarity. We're going to break down a couple of these. Victorian poetry. That's poetry that focuses on sensory elements. Their recurring themes were in conflict of science and religion, and an interest in medieval fables and legends. They also focused on ideas about nature and romance. Now, the next one is romanticism. Poems that revere the natural world, idealism, and physical and emotional passion. Then we have idealism, the metaphorical view that associates reality to ideas in the mind rather than material objects. And then we have what's called a haiku, a Japanese poetic form that consists of 3 lines, with 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the third. We also have what's known as imagism. Imagism, unlike its counterparts, was clear, simple, and precise. It was able to do that with the use of visual aids. Imagists replaced redundant, abstract, emotional terms and excessive style with precise, concrete details for real life. It was a study in directness, economy of language, avoidance of generalities, and a hierarchy of precise phrasing over adherence to poetic meter. Imagism was a reactionary movement against Victorian poetry and Romanticism. Pound was heavily influenced by the Japanese form of poetry, haiku. One of his most well-known Imagist poems was called In a Station of the Metro by Ezra Pound. The apparition of those faces in the crowd, petals on wet black bough. That's it. That's the end of the poem. Precise, direct. Now, let's count the words. How many words did you come up with? Don't forget the title. The answer is 20. Ezra used something called juxtapose. Cool word, huh? It basically means to place two different things side by side as to compare them or contrast them to create an interesting effect, like the example of night and day, or healthy and unhealthy eating. By comparing the crowded subway station to petals on a tree branch, the poem blurs a line between the speaker's reality and that of his imagination. Ezra is inviting us, the reader, to relate urban life to the natural world, maybe trying to get us to see them in a way we never thought of them before. Do you see what Ezra sees, or do you not? I will leave that to you to figure out. I did a fun little Imagist poem called Perspective Matters. And it's got a picture of skyscrapers, and you're looking up. It says, long way up, long way down. Perspectives Matter by Sammy C. So it's your turn. What do you think would be a good Imagist poem for a picture that you pick? Give it a try and see what you think. Let me know. Do you think Ezra Pound is one of your new favorite poets or not so much? So in our discussion today, we can see how poetry is continuing to move away from the Victorian style, moving into new forms, as it's continuing to be shaped and molded by new events and new people that are trying their hand in poetry. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Next week, we'll dive into something more than poetry with the next poet we'll discuss. Until next time.